Hey, welcome to today's daily walk. And our daily walks on Saturday mornings are what I call the gospel edition. I listen to gospel music, and Jesus and I have a conversation. And generally, it's about business and entrepreneurship. And last weekend, he threw a curveball at me. I wanted to talk to him about a business thing that I was thinking about. And he said, "We're going to talk about racism." I'm like, normally I decide the topics, Jesus. I don't want to talk about racism. But last week, that's what he brought in. And I showed up today's daily walk. I went to grab his hand, and he's like, "Guess what? We're going to talk about racism again." I'm like, "Dude, do I choose the topics or do you?" Well, he chose last week's topic. He chose today's topic. So we're going to continue on this discussion. And that's kind of how our discussion started. I go, "Jesus, didn't we talk about this last week?" And he goes, "Yeah, we did talk about it last week." "Well, what was last week?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean? Last week was last week." And he said, in other words, last week was history, right? I'm like, "Oh yeah, it was history." So let's talk, Jesse, about the history of racism. I'm like, "Okay, I'm not quite sure I'm following you." And he said, "Okay, well, when did slavery in America officially end?" And I Googled it, and what I found on Google was 1865. So that wasn't crazy long ago. And he said, "Okay, so picture yourself, your family, that would be your great grandma, okay, or grandpa, in 1865. Were they allowed to do what their calling was? Were they allowed to do what the talents and gifts that I gave them to do?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, probably not." So he's like, "Okay, so there were some who, they didn't mind being slaves. Hey, it was a roof over their head. It was their kids were cared for and whatnot, but they still were not allowed. If they were a great artist, for example, they couldn't go do art. If they were a great builder, they couldn't go and do their calling of building because they had to do with whatever the I don't know what they call it, master said to do or whatever. So it doesn't matter if they were cared for well or cared for not well, they still couldn't do their calling. They still couldn't go get educated. If you were a slave, you had restrictions, right? Obviously. So then he's like, "Well, when did slavery get abolished?" When I'm like, "Well, it's kind of 1865, but there's still issues a generation later." So now let's take it, okay, so it was abolished in around 1865. Now take it another generation, okay? So because, say I was a dad in 1865, I couldn't really teach my sons my calling. I really couldn't teach my daughter, my vocation because I had to do, with this. So now she didn't get, or he, my kids, didn't get a lot of what I had to offer. And they were growing up in a world that, yeah, okay, maybe we had the war and, slavery we were free, but no one was free, especially if you lived in the South, from what I read and what I researched. And that's just, typical American history. So now that second generation was still kind of held up from fulfilling their calling. Like if you wanted to be a lawyer in 1950, and you were a person of color or African American, Black, it was extremely tough to get into, say, law school compared to a white person. Extremely tough. So yeah, maybe in the legal jurisdiction was there equality, sure, but the people that were admitting people to say law school or doctors or college period, it wasn't going on. You remember the movie Remember the Titans, one of my all-time favorite movies. I believe that movie took place in the 70s, and they still had segregated drinking fountains and stuff. They still, it's insane. They still had Jim Crow laws. And again, I'm not a historian, so some of my timelines could be insanely off. This is just a conversation that Jesus and I had. So he's like, "Okay, so now the first generation could not fulfill their calling. It was very, very difficult to fulfill their calling because of slavery. The second generation, being brought up by that first generation, only knew of a world of slavery. Now look at the third generation. Even in the third generation, in the 70s, even early 80s, there was still, like, if you're on a job interview, it's like, hey, we got two people, we're going to take this one over here. So basically what you're seeing is it was very, very, very tough to economically make it, so to speak, in the African American community because of being held back from things that help you succeed financially, getting jobs, getting an education, okay? So it was made very, very hard for that community to thrive. Now some did. Some made it happen, man, even in like the heart of segregation and everything, they made it, and that's awesome. But it was still very, very difficult to do so. It would kind of like be like, say that you're going to go to me, and this is an analogy that Jesus gave me, okay? And I kind of like this analogy. He's like, all right, let's say you went to a powerlifting competition, right? And the guy who beat you had longer arms because that would give him a strategic advantage, okay? Well, it's not my fault that he has longer arms, right? And he's like, no. But now let's just say that you have shorter arms because 4 ancestors ago, 4 generations ago, you were made, they did these experiments and they said because, you're white, they're going to shorten your arms. I'm like, well, I'd be pissed. That's not cool, man. Like, I have a strategic disadvantage in this powerlifting meet because I was kind of raised in this environment genetically to have shorter arms. That's not cool. Well, it's very, very similar, okay? So we created, and when I say we, I talk about, the U.S., white America, whatever you want to say. We created a situation where it's very, very tough for someone of color to make it in society. So the point of the conversation that Jesus and I had is, okay, so what do we do about it today? And here is kind of the punchline of everything is go back to, let's say I go back to my lineage, all right? Let's say I find out that my great-great-great-great-grandpa, let's just say he fought for the slaves. Let's just say he lost his life for the slaves to free Americans. Say he was part of the North in that particular war. Okay, so why am I vanilla? Why am I not continuing to fight like my lineage fought? Okay, now let's say that I go back to my lineage, and let's just pretend that my lineage was like a plantation owner and he had 20 slaves. Why am I not being empathetic and speaking out against that? It's not me. It's not me. It's not even my grandpa. It's not even my great-great-grandpa. It could be my great-great-great-great-grandpa. Do you see what I'm saying? But why not go back to our lineage and either make restitution, okay? And what does restitution look like? It looks like empathy. It looks like listening. It looks like taking a stand. It looks like not blaming when people are angry. How would you be? Like I already gave you the deadlifting example. How would you be if you were raised in an environment that was clearly the environment was working against you? I mean, that would piss me off, man. I'd be like, are you kidding me? I got the deck stacked. If I'm gonna go play poker, I don't want the deck stacked against me. And that's exactly what happened, whether we like it or not, whether we want to admit it or not. We stacked the deck against people, against African Americans. The deck was stacked against them. That didn't mean they can't win. Hell yeah, many win. God bless them. But the deck was still stacked against them. All right. So that's what we can do, is we can just learn this history and not say, like what I used to say, like, well, it wasn't me. Hey, my mom does race relations. I tell people that, oh, I've got friends of every ethnic group. I'm good. No, you're not good. Because if you walk into a casino and you know that the deck is stacked and you say nothing about it, you do nothing about it, that's not good. You see what I'm saying? So the deck has been stacked. What are we doing to right that stacked deck? That's what Jesus and I talked about. I thought he made some very, very good points. So those are the points that I'm bringing on to you. I apologize. Some of my history may not be like 100% adequate. Him and I didn't like open up the history books and whatnot, but I think the points still remain. So this is a point that I wanted to make to, frankly, to white America, to people who were maybe in my place before all this happened, who were maybe not aware, maybe not fully woken up. So you guys have a great rest of your day. I really, really hope that you understand that my heart is pure. My heart yearns for peace, for joy. And I just wanted to do my part in maybe increasing awareness for white America on this issue.